Sinead O Connor, Empath or Narcissist, Part 6. We now continue with the analysis, this time with more information about her father. I tried to score some hash when I was about 15. Note, drug taking, lack of accountability, sense of entitlement, criminality. But it never turned up, largely because the dude I gave the fiver to died. And no, it wasn't my father who killed him. The dude was an associate of my stepsister, and my father knew he was up to no good. Dude was lurking on the path outside my father's front garden one night, peering over the hedge, waiting for my stepsister to come out. My father spied him and lured him into the garden with talk of, "She'll be out in a minute, come on in," then knocked him flat out on the grass with one punch to the side of his head. He was tall and lanky. My father is 5'4", like me. Dude had the utter gormlessness, this is an Anglo-Irish word for the stupidity of the sort that would have Bill Clinton in the Oval Office with a cigar and Monica Lewinsky, to come back another night, believing my father to be out. At the time, my little brother was young enough to have a tricycle. It was sitting in the tiny red-tiled porch outside the front door. As soon as my father spotted the dude, he grabbed the tricycle, ran with it to the gate, hopped onto it, and chased the guy down the road, his knees nearly hitting his face with each push of the pedals. Poor dude ran for dear life for miles, looking over his shoulder every few seconds with such an expression of sheer horror you'd think Freddy Krueger was after him. When my big brother was little, a dog was bothering him at school every morning. After a few weeks of no change in the situation, my father went in with my brother to locate the dog. Dog starts snarling at Joe. My father gives it one Francis Street kick. Dog never went near Joe again. You do not want to mess with my father. I'm like him, I guess. Now, pausing there. Her father comes across as absent much of the time, combative, but also seems to show some care for his children. Might it be that he saw them as an extension of himself subconsciously and defends them in this way against perceived threats to control? Or is it born of emotional empathy, that whilst it was there, it was limited in nature, but he certainly had it for his children in the way that he protected them against these outside threats? Note also that O'Connor identifies with being similar to her father. At school once, when me and my sister were about 5 and 6 respectively, we cornered a poor girl who had dared to state that her father was better looking than ours. Since our father was the handsomest man on earth, we weren't having her nonsense, so we made her take it back. Not that we were going to hurt her, and we didn't make any specific threat or anything, we just declared our absolute rejection of her assessment of the situation, and then towered over her silently until she recanted. We proudly informed our father that his honour and reputation had been defended. I ought to mention, if I have not already, my father's impressive and inspiring humility, of which I hope to have at least one drop. At 82, he's retired, of course, from his occupation as a construction engineer. But he still lifts me up when I am down. He makes me feel tall again when I feel small. I love him very much, and I regret all the years I didn't speak with him because I was young and stupid. I would advise any young person not to do what I did. Time passes quickly, and you can't get it back. But we are with each other now, and that is the greater blessing of both our lives. Genuine affection and admiration for her father, or simply nostalgic reminiscing, utilised for the triangulation of the audience. You can reach your own view. What it does demonstrate that she appears to recognise where things have gone wrong. And note, once again, that she aspires to be like him, that she recognises the traits in him which are admirable and worth having, and shows also a notable devotion to him, notwithstanding the fact that he was often absent from her life, that he did not appear to do a huge amount necessary to defend her from the abuse received from her mother. But notice, there's no blaming of him. Is this because he's viewed with rose-tinted glasses, perpetually seen as white, viewed in a golden way? Or is it simply that O'Connor recognises that there was nothing to be done, and there is no point in harping on about it? We then move forward in time, and O'Connor recalls when she'd moved to London. Once I'd made the final move to London and left my aunt's house, the minister declared his undying love. We had somewhat of an affair. This didn't go down well with my aunt when she figured it out, not only because the minister was married, but because I think she liked him too. So O'Connor has an affair with a married man. That would suggest a lack of emotional empathy for his spouse, and it shows a poor boundary recognition as she's interfering in an existing relationship. Or could it have been, perhaps, that she's susceptible to such an individual? Might it be the fault of the minister? After all, he's the one that's married and is cheating, and could it be that he had utilised his position of trust and authority, and might it have been that this is an example of emotional thinking from O'Connor to cause her to be drawn into such a relationship when she ought not to have done? She continues by explaining that her aunt was livid. She's never gotten over it, actually. Years later, when I went to a family get-together with one of my son's dads, she glared at me across the dance floor and kept silently mouthing, "I'll have him, I'll have him," pointing at him and then at her chest. The minister had convinced me, since I was young and an idiot, that his wife didn't understand him. I was his true love and all that stuff. Pausing there, it sounds somewhat familiar, doesn't it, in terms of some of the things that a narcissist might say. Was she a victim of one yet again? After a while, I realised I was being duped for the shtup, sitting by myself until our once-weekly hour-long visit, not going out with anyone else. I was like Whitney Bloom in Houston, saving all my love like a total moron. Soon, I stopped under flipping understanding him too. The minister arrived one night at the flat I'd rented in Lewisham after leaving my aunt's house. He had a messed-up vacuum cleaner his wife didn't want any more. He thought I might like it as a present. He'd had the nerve to tell her he knew someone who might want it. Awaiting her first album's release, I considered dropping it on his head from my sixth-floor balcony as I watched him walking to his car. I got myself a little yellow Fiat Bambino. You could drive in England then with only a provisional licence. I'd never had one lesson in my life. I got in the car really late at night and had a crash. Called the minister and said, "I'm hurt, I've crashed my car, will you come and get me?" He said no, he wouldn't, because he didn't want anyone to see him with me. I never contacted him again. I was actually badly hurt, twisted my pelvis, got slammed into at full speed by a car on the driver's side, but still have to get straightened out now and then. Right side doesn't move like it should. Walk funny, walk like Charlie Chaplin, didn't walk like that before. This involvement with the minister is also insightful. It could be that he was just a married man messing around, but there are suggestions that this individual might have been a narcissist, trotting out the usual, "my wife doesn't understand me," behaving with a shelf dynamic towards O'Connor, picking her up and putting her down as he sees fit, keeping her waiting, telling her she can't see anybody else, causing her to believe that it was true love and that she was the one that really mattered. Things that are often said by narcissists as part of the assertion of control over an affair partner. But notice she was wise to it at an early juncture. She didn't sit around for a long time. Instead, she quickly realised that she was being duped and wasn't putting up with it. She quickly realised that he wasn't going to help her. He shows the absence of emotional empathy by not wanting to come and check on her when she was hurt in a car crash. He basically said no because he was more concerned about being spotted, i.e. a potential threat to his control. And therefore the response of O'Connor was to never contact him again. She didn't keep saying, "Why won't you be with me? Why won't you speak to me? Why didn't you come to see me?" Instead, it was a much firmer, "No, I'm not putting up with this kind of behaviour. Fuck you." Whilst, of course, there are empathic individuals that can get to that point, it often takes them longer than the timeline that's mentioned here. And such behaviour could be that of a narcissist turning around and saying, "I'm not being treated this way," because she anticipates a threat to control and thus responds accordingly. Or it might be more determinative of the way that a narcissistic or normal individual would act. Namely, there isn't the presence of the addiction that an empath would have causing emotional thinking. A further point to consider. We're now going to wrap up in the next part with some further recollections from her past, which give us additional insight into the world of Sinead O Connor, before we move on to a very interesting section that deals with her relationships. Join me there in part 7.